So, guys, we're going to be talking to Tim Kirby today. He's in Moscow, your friend and mine, good friend of mine for a number of years. Always a very trustworthy source of information and very grounded perspectives. Um, just because someone is doing things in, Russia or Russian media doesn't mean they're a good guy or someone that you can get to know or trust. They might be, broadly on the right side of some historical question, but there's dickheads everywhere. And Tim Kirby is not one of them. And so it's the kind of guy that you meet and you've got somebody golden, and there's really nothing for the guy that I wouldn't do. And it's been a blessing to have a friend like that in my life, and someone with some very unique, oftentimes brilliant perspectives. He's a man of many talents, in fact, from art, fiction, concepts, new ideas, media, constantly brainstorming. He's always doing a different project. He's someone that can do one thing, and then he can see what the next thing is as he's doing it. And he'll set things up, and other people will come kind of fill his shoes in an imperfect way and run the project. And he's off making the next project. And so it's always great to be working with dynamic people.
So I should thank you for the very warm introduction that I did actually hear. So thank you.
It's fantastic to have you with us, man. So what's going on, man? What's on your mind?
Oh, on my mind personally, I don't know. That's a bit of a different thing. If we want to talk about in terms of what's going on with the war, yeah, you do not feel really in your day-to-day life. I think we all feel that something changed in the economy as of a couple of years ago or a little over a year. But ultimately, no, you don't feel that there's a war going on at all.
And what is your impression of that? Is that a strength? Is there a liability in there? It doesn't have to be one or the other.
I would say it's a strength. Why? Because it sort of kind of makes everyone happy. It's sort of like, well, we needed to get this solved. We needed to get this Ukrainian issue done with. But at the same time, the economy isn't hurting. And also, one might argue that if Russia actually mobilized for World War II, ultimately it would kind of make the economy worse, because we live in an era of the service industry and all these investments and stuff. And if we forced every adult male to either go fight or go, make artillery shells, it actually would wind up being very damaging to Russia economically. So I think this is kind of par for the course. I just wanted to bring up for the audience, though, that the philosopher who cannot be mentioned on your channel wrote a book that was translated very well into English called Putin versus Putin. And it sort of shows how, in a lot of ways, Putin sort of does. Sometimes he's Mr. Super Patriot Nationalist guy, and then sometimes he sort of placates the liberals and all this stuff. It sort of shows how Putin really doesn't like to take, let's just say, he doesn't like to burn bridges. He doesn't like to put all his chips down on one bet ever. And I think that the way that we're sort of doing this, it's like, well, let's maintain the peacetime economy, but we're also going to fight the war, but we're going to kind of fight it by sitting here and waiting for them to die on our bayonets. It's actually very much in line with the methodology that the philosopher believes that Putin himself actually follows. So I really recommend everyone try out that book. It's just like I said, the translation is top notch.
Yes, in fact, the translation was done in part by a friend of someone we won't mention because of the controversy, but someone we both know, and was involved in that. And then it was published by Artco's publishers, right?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure they have been doing his English language stuff. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, there's also, you guys might know Jay Arnold and John Stalcheski, who do the Prov Publishing House. It's an outfit that Jay started a couple of years ago, and they're going to be coming out with a book of Daria's, posthumously published stuff, of course. Unfortunately, rest in peace of Daria's stuff.
Yeah. Well, yeah, it's unfortunate. I know she was really working on putting together this concept like a sort of Christianized feminism, of sort of like what this if we're going to sort of live with this idea of feminism, how should it work? I don't know. I think it's easier to just sort of reject it rather than try to take something that is inherently not really in line with orthodoxy and try to mold it or weld it into a shape it was never meant to be in. But that's me. So unfortunately, one of her big sort of lifetime projects, her sort of magnum opus, never got completed. So I hope that maybe some of her closer friends or these people who are working with her remaining materials are able to at least put together a sketch of what her vision for that would be.
Yeah, that's Prov Publishing, and yeah, actually, yeah, one of the guys was our project director at Center for Syncretic Studies for a couple years, and he's gone on to bigger and better things. I'm always happy to see that, and I hope they get this. I know this book's coming out now very soon, actually, so we'll share that link anyway. But yeah, man, so it's so yeah, the idea that you don't have a fully mobilized society, but it's a country that it's producing enough armaments. I mean, just with the, I mean, with one of its one of its main battle tanks is at like the T-90, that they're producing these like 1,200 of these or 1,500 of these a year. They're producing about 120 or something of these every month.
Yeah. That I can't tell you for sure, but I can tell you that overall, even many years before this war started, you could see in the West that they really like the idea that Russia doesn't actually produce anything and they're still relying on Soviet equipment. And that is so far from the truth, because actually all munitions, once they turn 25 years old, are either sold to poor countries or destroyed. So Russia actually has so much ammo that until this war started, very often they would have to destroy stuff. So this whole idea that Russia is sort of sitting around on Soviet relics, there are some Soviet boats still in service. Boats, I mean military boats.
Yeah.
True. I think some of the submarines were built in the Soviet Union, but this idea that it's completely reliant on the remnants of the USSR is just mental. That's absolutely not the case. And even at the very beginning phase of Putin, that was not really so much true anymore.
Yeah, you know what's really weird about that, dude, is that there's like 2 or 3 fairly mainstream big websites in the West in English language that cover military developments, that compare armaments, that compare tanks and missile systems and stuff. Yeah. And they're American or they're Western, and they consistently, accurately were describing like the superiority of like systems like S-400, S-500, or the various different MiGs and Sukhoi jets. They've been consistent about that, and yet that's very different. I mean, so Americans who actually follow military stuff closely and read those magazines know that the Russian equipment is top notch. That's what's so weird about it, and yet it's very different when you get these pundits and stuff to come on CNN or to come on BBC, and it's this, I don't know, General Benjamin Hodges' theory of information war, where they just make a completely different, they just like spin it from whole cloth, basically.
Mm-hmm. Well, yeah. Well, the question is, I don't know where they get their information from, but I would assume it's not from the mainstream media, because, as you've probably noticed, which is actually in some ways a little should be surprising, is that, when these people who have fancy uniforms with a lot of medals, in a lot of ways, when they put together their sort of official opinions on things, like we'll take Milley or Lloyd Austin or whoever. What's that? Admiral Kirby, who's ruining my last name. All those guys, yeah. They take their information about Russia's military from the mainstream media. Like, they don't take it from some sort of fancy dossier that was put together by some sort of intelligence gathering services. It's really comes from, BBC, CNN, and all that. And that's another thing that's baffling, that we have all these intelligence agencies, but when we have got to have official truth comes from like someone with a bachelor's degree from Yale who's sitting in New York. They're the ones who really know what the Russian military is like from the inside. You know?
Yeah, no, that's absolutely it, man. Man. Let me ask you. Yeah, go on.
So again, one thing I just want to, I'll get to, I just don't want to completely cut you off here, but one thing that's very important, why, again, Joaquin, I think I mentioned last time we talked, but in order to really understand Russia, you kind of have to throw statistics out the window. Because if you get into a game of statistics about Russia, I would say that almost everything is a lie, especially if it's a Western source. So we have to kind of go into this sort of like disinformation soup where we don't really know anything. And I think that would be a much better way to interpret things, because as soon as you get into this game of statistics about Russia, all the statistics come from the West. They all come from the mainstream media. I'm even talking about statistics from like 1920. So nothing is clear. Everything is essentially disinformation or quarter truths and all that stuff.
But it's weird because it's kind of one of the rules of life that you're not supposed to underestimate your opponent. And yet it seems that the whole Western narrative is based upon narrative. And that narrative is built upon that the West will win because it's unstoppable, because it's the most advanced, futuristic, free, enlightened, dynamic, scientific, human rights, like everything. It's a type of supremacism, actually, according to the philosopher who can't be named, that he equates, in a sense, to the legacy of colonialism, imperialism, which also gave us things like racism and things like that. So he kind of equates it to racism, even though it's like human rights racism or something like that.
Well, that's kind of interesting there. I can say that if we're going to look at things through this sort of like the West looking down. Well, basically, you kind of made the thought of like, why do they underestimate their enemies? Well, the idea of having this sort of concept in your mind of these certain rules of engagement, or I don't know if this is part of political realism of international relations, but let's just say it is, because it kind of feels that way. If you have a very realistic look at this whole international relations deal, you're going to think that, you should never underestimate anyone ever. You should also then really want to have a society where there's at least 20 to 40% of men are pretty tough and pretty resilient and are going to be ready to fight for the motherland, and that your country should pursue policies that ultimately serve its interests. Obviously, kind of have to wheel and deal with your neighbors to an extent, so on and so forth. But, the West, Joaquin, ignores all of this. All of that sort of traditional ideas about like how to build our tribe to be the strongest tribe, or at least a tribe that sort of survives till tomorrow, that is out the window. That is gone. So we shouldn't be surprised that all these old adages and strategies have vanished. And that's, I think, ultimately why the West is losing, because it's really just sort of said, nope, the last 5,000 years of human history don't matter. That was for the ancient Egyptians, not for us.
Yeah.
I don't know.
And so when you're looking at, for example, right, we have like reports coming in that for a couple of days now, that the Russians are, moving in different directions now, that they've taken some initiative. Is that preparatory? I mean, I know this is just kind of, spitballing it and stuff, but what do you see happening, or what's your sense? People, and just nothing too inside. Don't give away anything that's, security issue, but what's your sense? Well, let's put it that way.
I'll put it this way, Joaquin. Generally, when I get tipped off from certain people that are kind of in the know, they don't have a big mouth, and they assume as soon as they tip me off that information is gone. So it is in the public. So I have no secret information about the war of any kind, whether it be something good or bad, from the standpoint of Russia's survival. The whole sort of word on the street thing is kind of quiet right now, because there have been some small advances. Perhaps this is one of these sort of testing the waters kind of thing. I'm not really too particularly sure about what's going on, but there's definitely not been any sort of like massive moves. Everything is sort of slow and incremental. The thing you mentioned before I came on about the grain deal, and now that essentially Ukraine is going to be landlocked, or anything that goes past it is going to get sunk. Although officially this grain deal ended because the time ran out and Russia doesn't want to renew it. That's the official truth. But I think that sort of lines up with the fact that maybe now might be the time for Russia to move before fall sets in. And then it's going to be another 3 or 4 months waiting for the ground to re-harden in the middle of winter. And if we recall, last winter was actually very mild, especially for Ukraine, which is farther south than Moscow. So the ground really wasn't hard for very long and took a long time to harden. So essentially, in some ways, this is kind of a now or never thing if they really want to make some major push.
So
if
would
they
you
want to
say
do
that global warming
Yeah.
has delayed the war?
Yeah, I guess it was all Greta Thunberg. She was like, "See, Russia, this is what you get for not supporting the production of electric cars, you bastards." But yeah, so but on the other hand, we also have to remember there's a human factor of, okay, Russia grabs 20 kilometers here, 20 kilometers there. Pretty soon that adds up. So
Right.
who knows? Maybe this is like what the sort of offensive is looking like, because in the northern stretch of the front, from what I've always been sort of explained, is it is kind of hard to take that. If there's too many hills, or the Ukrainians sort of have the high grounds and the forests. Basically, Russia's been kind of stuck there. That's like why they sort of left the Kharkov area. And I think now the Ukrainians might be thin enough that that's why they're moving there, because they really want to maybe take that while they can, and their lines are thinning. It's kind of hard to say. Another thing that I don't know, because I'm not a military expert, is as you saw with this the start of the counteroffensive, with this now iconic image of just these packs of tanks and armored vehicles just in a bunch being blown up. So the Ukrainians attack. The Russians shoot at the first vehicle in the column. That one stops moving, and then the others kind of have to try to drive around it. They hit landmines because, they had something come in to clear the mines in front of them. So essentially, once the first one gets hit, the column stops, and they pound it, and destroy it. There are so many landmines out there. The question is, I don't quite know how armies deal with that. When they lay countless hectares of landmines, how they themselves then avoid their own mines, that's another sort of philosophical question. And I think on the northern part of the front, there are a lot less mines, because that's not where the counteroffensive was being built. So it could also be a reason why there's more activity more northbound. But again, with this whole grain deal thing being busted up, who knows? Maybe it's going to be time for them to just melt the entire port area of Odessa and try to take that, because that's eventually something that's probably going to have to be taken back to Russia proper, whether Putin likes it or not.
You think that's something that is coming from the population, or the expectation upwards then, or is it a practical thing? You're saying it's a necessity?
Well, about things that come upwards, I'm very sure, and I'm very sure, and especially after that, whether it was staged or whether it was real or not, that like 3-hour discussion that Putin had with some more notable media personalities and indie bloggers and all that about the war.
And Urasumi, and yeah,
is that I think he is actually listening to some of these more opinions from the street, and about what to do, and this, that, and the other, what would look good. I do think that Putin's entire presidency has been very focused on trying to predict what's going to yield good public opinion, this, that, or the other, which I guess you could call democracy. But ultimately, it's sort of his decision, and it's really hard to say, because unlike what everyone says, Putin is not he's not like me. I am more ideological and aggressive. I would have seen this opportunity in a very American way of being like, well, now that you guys have done this, you've started the war, guess what? Everything that's historically Russian goes back home. That is not the opinion of the president of the Russian Federation, who at first was like, well, we're going to grant the Donbass, the two Donbass republics independence. The war keeps going on. We've essentially occupied a big chunk of Kherson and the Zaporozhye, and don't dare call it Zaporizhia like they do. Well, that's disgusting. Zaporozhye. And when you have already that taken, then all of a sudden it's like, well, we have 4 new states now. Welcome to the Union. So I'm not quite sure. I don't know what's going to happen, but I do know that Putin is not like ideologically driven in a lot of his decision making. Like, I don't think that he's sitting there like, yes, we will return Odessa to its rightful place. This is of paramount importance. I don't think that he's really thinks that way. But if push comes to shove and he has the opportunity, he is pragmatic, and taking back Odessa would be pragmatic.
Pragmatic, I see. A cultural question. We've now seen, I think, the 5th or 6th viral clip where you'll have a Ukrainian young man who, for some reason, is not at the front, but has a lot of money to be traveling in Switzerland or Italy or France. And they confront like Russian families or Russian people, and it'll be a young man. This is like the 4th or 5th one we've seen like this in the past maybe 6 months, where a young man starts to physically or verbally accost a woman for being Russian. And this is a fighting age man who, should be at the front if he is so passionate about it on the Ukrainian side. He would have a right to be, I guess, right? But instead he's on vacation and he decides to attack Russian civilians. And you're not seeing the Russians on vacation because I spend enough time on Ukrainian Telegram. Putin, by the way, said that he's on Telegram. That's where a lot of the stuff that he's scanning and looking at, comparing, reports from his commanders and stuff, because things he sees in real time trickling in through Telegram. But what's going on with the culture, the difference in Ukraine versus Russia, where this is being encouraged, or how is this normalized in Ukraine that it's a patriotic duty for young men to assault women?
Well, I can tell you one thing is that, Joaquin, it is a lot easier to, it's one thing to believe in something. It's another thing to die for it. I'll put it that way. All of our friends at Starbucks in San Francisco who are dreaming of some sort of rise of an American Che Guevara. You go fight the National Guard. You know what I mean? Like, that's right. A completely different thing to sort of put your money where your mouth is. The real difference within Russia is that this is, for the Ukrainians, this is hysterical. If you've noticed from the very beginnings of this, from the beginnings of the whole Maidan thing, this is the whoever isn't jumping is a Muscovite, where you have people who are just standing around jumping like madmen, like they're on some sort of amphetamines, because if they stop jumping, they are their enemy. Everything is very primitive. It is very black and white tribal, whereas within Russia proper, I even shared this photo a long time ago. There's a Ukrainian restaurant chain called Korchma. It's still open. There's no one in Russia who's going up to this Ukrainian restaurant chain and like throwing bricks at it. You know what I mean? So like it's sort of,
yeah, I mean, Russians continue to embrace the different, aspects of the broader Russian world. And you can, throughout Moscow, there's restaurants with, what is it, like Tajiki food and Uzbeki food. I love, you can be in Moscow and enjoy some Uzbek plav. You can eat Ukrainian food. People don't have anti-Ukrainian like prejudice. It's not like at this. It sounds like what you're describing in Ukraine sounds a lot like what's been called mass formation or mass psychosis.
Well, let's talk then about what are things that are banned in Russia? There's a lot of groups that, because they either engage in like direct terrorism, as in they kill people to prove a point, or they engage in what I call sort of an umbrella term, rabble rousing, as in trying to destabilize Russia. Like, those groups get banned. But So that includes, your like your right sector is an illegal organization within Russia, and your Azov battalion and all this other stuff, and these Vlasovцы, the Russians who supposedly want to fight for the Ukrainian side, so on and so forth. But beyond that, there's nothing that's banned that's like Ukrainian. There's no like linguistic ban or any of this other stuff. It's really a kind of a thing where for Ukraine, this is this fundamental. I'll put it this way. It's almost like when you have, I'm trying to think of an American equivalent. This is a bad equivalent, but it's kind of that way. Like where you have this thing of these, like at the Ferguson protests, where you have especially lovely light-skinned graduates from the Ivy League trying to tell Black Americans that you're oppressed. This is an evil colonial state. You're this, that, and the other. And they're getting like people, fired up with these fuels of with the fuel of hatred over something that's maybe questionable in its historical authenticity. And, they get all riled up and go up to some elderly white couple who aren't particularly racist and don't particularly hate them and have no power. You know what I mean? It's like,
Right.
It's like one group sees this as this huge, like bitter, like deep-seated, like blood hatred. And the other group just sees them as like the way Americans see Southerners. It's like they're a type of American called Southerners with a little bit of an accent. And that's it. And this hasn't really changed since the Maidan or since the war. It's the same thing. I mean, we just saw the other day, I think it was on your channel, where you shared a video of what was a discussion over like walkie-talkies of the one side, like a Ukrainian group trying to explain how they want to surrender. They're like, we're over here. You hit us 20 minutes ago, and don't hit us again. We'll surrender. So the thing is, both of them are speaking Russian, but the guy on the other side has that typical like Ukrainian accent. So it really is like an American from the North talking to an American from the South. We speak the same language, same logic. Only, the Southerner has a drawl, and Ukrainians can't say the letter G the way Russians do. That's it. You know what I mean?
That people will know that video because they give the instructions, and the Russian guy gives them a guarantee of the safety of the group, and he says, don't worry, brother, don't worry about this, friend. Yeah, just don't move your position. If you guys are safe there, we're going to send a group to come and take you guys into custody. Yeah.
And that's also, I think, one of the reasons why, with the exception of the successes of the commissariat, which are the ultimate example of being a commissar is kind of a cowardly position. You don't really fight. You just sit and wait until your own guys start to flee and then shoot them while they're defenseless. So besides the commissariat, I do think by the end of the war, we're going to be able to finally see some rough statistics. Again, remember, all statistics about Russia are questionable, but some rough statistics of just how many guys have surrendered. It has to be a lot. Like a lot, So yeah, and the thing is that it's also a lot easier to surrender when you both speak the same language and are from sort of more or less the same universe there.
Yeah, I mean, it's a civil war more than anything else. Is kind of what I emphasize the most on the channel.
Oh, yeah, I would say in a lot of ways it bears a lot of resemblance to the American Civil War, because remember, if we just want to, again, take things in a real broad brush, right? Real broad brush. The South is like, we are different from you. We are not part of your thing anymore. You guys have gone too far in a particular direction. You're bad. We're different now. We're breaking away. And the North is like, the hell you are. You're the same as us. You're part of our country. You're staying. And that's ultimately like what this is all about.
And you see, of course, you see that in the whole approach. I've described it as magnanimous, in fact, that the Russian approach has been, I mean, I don't really believe that you can, as a, consistently as a whole organization, practice purity of arms. It's kind of the myth of purity of arms, because war is ugly and sometimes you just got to get things done to win. But taking all that into consideration, you're just seeing so much more concern about the well-being of the civilians and even the soldiers on the other side, that, people outside of the world who are, let's say rooting for Russia, they're still mind blown at the care and the time that Russia has taken in its campaign.
Oh, yeah, and that's evident because if we were, I just cleared my throat like he does. If you were to listen to Colonel Douglas McGregor, he always says that Putin is thinking of the future and about how he wants to live next to people. But I would say that he should tweak that opinion to being, yeah, he does have to live next to Europe, and Russia can't seem like a monster. But again, this entire time, it's very hard to really even tell, especially in Ukraine, who is some sort of like Lvov-based ultra-Nazi who is not part of Russian civilization, and who is Ivan from some forgotten place who, again, pronounces the letter G improperly and is actually more part of the Russian world. So again, you're really, from the beginning of this, you're trying to fight a war where potentially every person around you could be one of your own.
Wow, right.
Yeah, so it makes it a real tough assignment, and is one of the reasons why this war has certain weird, let's just say, characteristics.
Right. Yeah, putting it mildly. Yeah. Huh. Now, we have Prigozhin says he's in Belarus now. They're there.
Well, he's been back to Russia proper despite the deal.
Right. Yeah, we saw a funny thing that was showing his flights and stuff from Moscow, St. Petersburg, and stuff like after the coup. Ayatollah rock and rolla. Yeah. And so obviously we know we don't need to develop that too much, because I think everyone listening to this show kind of got what that was all about. It was wonderfully conducted. The West is still talking about that, like in all the reality that they're projecting into it. And it's been really funny in the information sphere, because this was happening right as you had the Western media having to try to account for this failed counteroffensive. And it looked really like they were about to blow up a nuclear power plant or something like this. Yeah. And then it was, the uprising in Russia. And then then the Ukrainian side, or the West, you got to kind of chalk that up as a victory at an important time for them.
This there definitely was a grand feeling that a lot of optics were going on with this. So, yeah. One thing I'd also like to mention that I think is important is perhaps I'm wrong, but, just even in passing, like, sometimes I'm working and I'm tired and I just open VK and sort of scroll and, watch what's in the news feed, right? And you get a lot of stuff from the war. There were videos during this whole Prigozhin uprising of like somewhere there's a helicopter moving, somewhere it looks like they maybe shot a rocket. But we hear that somehow they did actually kill people in this process of this thing happening, but you don't really see any video of it, which I think is something we should take note of. So it was very weird. I can't tell you one thing though, Joaquin, is I've really because I always have to move around, and so I've always been worried about buying a gun because I'm often not home. But this was the one time, because they were basically going to meet Prigozhin's men on the highway that I live on, basically, not far from home. So this is one of those times I was like, oh man, I am not prepared for Armageddon this time. I'm not ready if someone comes over my wonderful 2-meter high galvanized steel fence and I have to blow their head off. I'm unarmed. I'm gonna have to go in here with an axe in one hand and a spear in the other, or something, like a Zulu warrior. So yeah, or I should say probably an ancient German. What?
When and why did you move to Russia?
Well, Well, I wrote a whole book about that. In fact, someone was kind enough. They actually gave a English language review, because you can sort of have it auto-translated. They said the auto-translation is very good. So there's a whole book on that, but because it is the number one question that gets asked to me during my life living here. But I don't really get asked it very often in English, so that's not so bad. But I can tell you that you have sort of a combination of factors.
What year?
You have
when?
It was 2006, the very end of 2006.
Got it. Yeah. And why?
Why is because my life in Cleveland wasn't quite going the way I wanted it to, and I could sort of sense then, although I couldn't really put it into words. Remember, in a lot of ways, the social experiment roller coaster begins with African America. They get subjected to everything first, and that's where I'm from, and so I could see kind of where this whole woke destruction of the family nonsense, the attack on men was coming from, and I was like, yeah, it is time to bail, baby. I'm out of here. Yes. So
One thing people don't know about us that we share in common is that we come from urban environs, I guess is the way to put it.
Yeah. That's being polite. We come from poverty. That's the proper way. If my mom hears this, she hates that because she always feels like that. It's like I, in some ways, blaming her that we didn't really have any money growing up. That's fine. It's not her fault. I don't know. I'm not bitter about that. It is the way it is, man. And in fact, it's good because it really opens your eyes to reality. Because so many people now always write me about, Tim, how can I move to Russia? How can I move to Russia now? Because now they've been bitten by the restrictions on the virus. Now they've sort of seen the unmasking of wokeness. Whereas thanks to my background, this stuff became kind of evident long ago, and so I'm already here.
Heather in the audience says, "Get a gun, bro. Get a gun."
The bureaucracy involved. Oh my God, there's so much to do bureaucratically in my life. It's like, I just don't want to. And the one hard part is having a gun is your responsibility in Russia. So if someone steals it, you get in trouble. And it's like, I'm not home so much. Like, I don't know. I have mixed feelings. I'm gonna do it eventually, maybe when my life stabilizes a little bit. But for now, I just can't even think of doing something else bureaucratic, because I actually had to do some medical tests recently, and like doing that, and I had this like I don't know what to call it, like a cyst removed and all this other medical stuff. And it's like, I don't want to see any paperwork. I don't want to see. I'm just burnt. Absolutely
I hate
burnt.
paperwork. I just I can't handle. For me, my eyes gloss over with paperwork, man. I just
Yeah, me too. And because of the war, I can't get a new American driver's license set here. I should say Ohio. So at some point, I'm going to have to go through the nightmare. And I keep putting it off because I just don't want to do it, of getting a Russian driver's license. Oh, it's the worst. It is the absolute worst. There seems to be a new law that basically means if you have a driver's license, you just have to pass the written test part of it, which is nice. Maybe that'll offer some hope. But we have to remember this is Russia, and just because someone made a law doesn't mean that the people at the DMV know that law exists. So it's still going to be a nightmare, because you're going to have to go up to them and convince them this law exists and blah, blah, blah. So I don't know. I was thinking of doing this maybe in August when I'll have a little bit of free time at home, but I don't know. I'm just I'm going to have to do it eventually, but I really keep putting it off because it's just a nightmare, an absolute nightmare.
I mean, granted, 2006 America. I mean, we're, I know, you were born in the early 80s, and you're from Ohio, and I know that you moved to Russia. Okay, so it's 2006. But you gave general, but I mean, what was, there's a lot of places. You could have moved to Colombia, you could have moved to Thailand, you could have moved to France or England, or, you know what I mean? Why Russia?
Well, because all my ancestors came from Eastern Europe. There's a bit of a sort of chain of events here that really solidified Russia, because despite the fact that there was, the rise of fascism, World War II, then communism, and all this other stuff happening in Poland, the address of my mom's side of the family from Poland didn't change through all of that. Can you believe it? So wow. My maternal grandmother was in contact with my Polish relatives throughout all of this stuff. Back in the old days, you had to actually send letters. And so I kind of went to see them when I was a teenager, and I actually did the Peace Corps from 2004 to 2006. So look out, former State Department employee, baby. So I really wanted to do Poland to kind of try out this lifestyle of living in Eastern Europe with a golden parachute. But Poland closed basically right as I applied. They were like, "We're done with you. You've already been assimilated." And so I actually was put in Kazakhstan. So I learned Russian, and that really pushed me a bit farther east, because when I was a younger man, it was less maybe political, ideological, a little bit, but it was kind of more like going back to the motherland, to be like everyone else, to kind of not be different. Because Joaquin, I can tell you something. Being an ethnic minority is no fun, especially when that ethnic minority status is very obvious. And I was just absolutely sick of that. 18 years of the whole skin color issue. I was just completely burnt. Like, I'm done with this. And so that was kind of a big part of why Eastern Europe, because I know that,
when
you can go to
a minority in Ohio.
Yeah, Cleveland, even back then, 55% of Cleveland was black. The other 45% was just whatever else. And I think it's continued that way even to this day. And so you could really feel the racial tension. You could cut it with a knife. I'll put it that way. And sometimes people did cut it with a knife. So, you kind of just get sick of this stuff. And I wanted to be somewhere where I could maybe assimilate more, because places like, Thailand, for example, I actually had the chance to work there, which was kind of interesting. But even before then, even as like a teenager, I knew that, say I did go to Thailand. First off, I don't like hot weather, but whatever. I knew that, I'm completely different from these people. They are never really going to accept me. I'm always going to be an outsider. What am I getting out of this? I could just remain here and be a complete outsider. Because the other thing, Joaquin, that people don't understand is, especially as if you grow up as a minority in a culture, you tend to take a lot from the majority culture. So when you grow up and everyone around you is black, and then you try to go into, let's just put it this way. How can I put this in a respectable way? You get into your Ted Cruz America, your like white people who are, wearing their khakis with their white tennis shoes and their polo shirt that's buttoned up to the point where they're choking on it. And everyone has a really high-pitched, nervous voice, like their homeowners association and their, like that whole universe is as alien to me as anything else. And so, like, even after college, I was kind of like, man, I might look like you people technically, but you are in a different realm. And so that was another reason.
Women in golf clothes, women wearing golfing outfits just look like lesbians. Go on.
Yeah. Well, I don't know. I actually kind of like golf. I can't deny that I have some European ancestry here. But, I definitely felt, especially through my work experiences, I was like, these people are in a different universe. Like, and especially because, Black Americans aren't politically correct. Okay. They've been attacked by wokeness, especially on the whole, like, I'm a strong, independent woman. I don't need no man. Like that kind of, like, watch Kevin Samuels. Go back, the late great Kevin Samuels, watch his videos. You can see this almost psyop designed to destroy the black community that he spent his latter years of his adult life trying to fight. But anyways, one thing they don't do is any of this, like, you can't be weak, you can't be a wimp. And so as soon as you get into, again, this very, very pedantic white picket fence, everyone has to smile all the time universe, it's equally bizarre and alien as it is in sixth grade when I was like the only white guy in the American football team. You know what I mean? Like, so there was sort of no hope in that way. I don't know. Maybe Joaquin, I could have potentially, now that I think about it, potentially shaved my head, worn flannel. I do like to wear actually shorts with long socks on occasion, and pretend that I was some kind of Mexican there. Maybe that could have worked out, because I think that's
our national uniform. Yeah.
Yeah, because dude, the national uniform is awesome, and to be honest, like I think that could have been a nice form of assimilation. I just because there's already like every person in Cleveland who's like I forget like the terminology and all this, but they're like Latino, Chicano, da da da. You talk to them they're like, hello, my name is Ronald Hernandez, and I speak like this. There is like no one speaks Spanish, like. At the most, there'll be someone who has that sort of thing like Cardi B, who spoke Spanish as a child but forgot all of it. So she kind of still talks a little bit like this, but her native language is English, chunomai. There's a little bit of that going on. But so like, yeah, I could do that, bust out with like a culo when I'm feeling angry and just pretend. I could have done that, but I didn't know that because actually in Ohio in the 1980s, there were so few, basically Ohio is white and black. Everyone else who's something else is all just like this weird sort of other grouping, or at least back then. So I didn't really see that as an option, but yeah. So there's sort of a quest for identity.
We have the expression is OTM. There's like brown people that have like assimilated into the Chicano culture that can be from Pakistan or Philippines or whatever. And they can become cholos and they can become Hispanicized or Chicanoized, but they're called OTMs or other than Mexican. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. I would say that in Cleveland, the equivalent of that would be Hindus. Because if you're Hindu, at some point during your teenager years, you have the choice to either become like a white guy Hindu or a black guy Hindu. And It's amazing because so you have like, hello, my name is Encore Patur or something, and I'm going to become an engineer. And then we had this one kid who loved that his name was Raj Beer because he had beer in his name. So, he was all like, yo, man, I'm Raj Beer because I'm always drunk. What up? And, so he'd show up to school all drunk and stuff, but he was a really huge guy. Like, I think he wound up being like 6'4", 6'5". So he was sort of big enough that he could be as lame as he wanted to be and have like no consequences.
Right, of course.
Dude, the dude was huge. I'm a pretty big guy myself, and he towered over me, man. So, yeah.
Now, when people are trying now to look at the world, kind of just shifting gears here, not away from the personal. This is all about you. But so moving to Russia, the reasons were not ideological, right? But then you're there and then you begin to absorb something or you're seeing things through a certain lens. So you actually were in Russia first and then you later encounter the philosopher who can't be named.
Well, yeah. Well, actually, a brief month in Poland as a teenager, Peace Corps service in Kazakhstan, then starting life in Russia. But yeah, I sort of discovered that later. I met the philosopher who can't be named after I sort of had a radio show, because as I did get older, I got a little bit more excited about sort of like these political things, and I was sort of given the chance to talk about that kind of stuff on the radio. And he was one of my very first guests.
Go on, yeah.
So that's how I got acquainted with him. And I would say that if people also want to know Russia, there's a couple, I guess you'd want to call them maybe ideological camps of basically maybe people who have sort of this guru status. The philosopher who can't be named is one. He definitely has a lot of people who support him. And I think ultimately his overall, I don't want to say his views because he has a broad range of views. They've sometimes changed over time. They tend to be a lot more passionate than what you see. But his way seems to get the most reaction from within the state, as in the whole multipolar world concept. The concept of perhaps we should actually offer the Europeans to save them from themselves. These sorts of ideas get a lot of traction. Person number two, who sometimes his sort of way of thinking about things gets a little bit of traction from the state, is a guy called Sergei Kurganyan, who you're probably familiar with.
Essence of Time. Yeah, EOT,
Essence of Time. Essence of Time, USSR 2.0. He is extremely popular, and I wouldn't be surprised if a few people listening here are his I know it's going to sound negative. I wanted to call them acolytes, but that sounds negative in English.
Followers.
Fans. Knowledgeable fans, let's call them, right? And then after that, you start to get into more like you have the, what's his name, Gherkin crowd of the people who are like obsessed with that guy with the mustache who fought in the early phase of the Maidan and sort of kind of has his own little political thing going. You get into my least favorite group is the Concept for State Security, which is KOB in Russian. They are the worst. They're the absolute worst. It is the ultimate, like, I'm a loser, but I am going to believe in this ideology where no, everyone around me is an idiot. I have basically they're Gnostics. They're like this weird Gnostic semi-secular cult. Absolutely
it's like a
bizarre.
pagan Gnostic secular thing.
Yeah. That's called, and the problem is it doesn't really translate very well into English, but it's a concept of state security. So I don't know if you guys have heard much of them, but if you ever get sent by a Russian person like a video that's going to be like, hey, guess what? Did you know that in ancient Egypt was the beginning of like the organization of repression, as in like the priesthood in ancient Egypt would use their priestly magic and knowledge of science to manipulate the masses into being, sort of subservient. It's like that has been everywhere throughout all of history. Like they don't get it. Like you tell them, like, look, you're saying that because people had to believe in a dogma like Christianity, that they had to make certain sacrifices to believe in that dogma, so that's bad. But then you also have an ideology, and people have to sort of believe in these sort of tenets of the ideology and maybe put aside their feel. They're just in this weird world where everyone is being dominated throughout all of history except for them. They're like the only free people. And they also express the idea that Jesus is definitely a real prophet of God. Like everything in the Bible is true, but the church is evil. And it's like, well, then where'd the Bible
Protestant sect or something?
Yeah. Or it's like, they would also say then that the Prophet Muhammad was also real, but everything about him that's ever been written, including the Quran and all the the surahs and hadiths and all this other stuff, was all sort of partially manufactured to oppress people. So it's a very, very weird thing, but they're the most annoying people. The reason I forgot why they're the most annoying, because their prophet, the person who is oh my God, Joaquin, who do you think from Russian history is the person who has the answers to the future? And we're talking about politics here. We're talking about the political answer. Like, for example, someone like a figure like Marx, or perhaps like figures like the founding fathers of America, or like Voltaire, or all that. Who from Russian history? What person?
I don't know. Rasputin.
No, that'd be interesting. Pushkin.
Oh,
the author,
the poet,
write about
the
politics. Author? Yes. They say that you have to because they're Gnostics. The secret is that you have to decode Pushkin, and that's
to get
what they
political
work
science out of it.
Yeah, like basically that all of Pushkin's writings are contain the essence of what Russia is, and that only like the Gnostic wizards they have can decode it. It's amazing, and they're 100% straight faced, and you tell them. Pushkin didn't write about politics. And if he did write about human nature, well, there's a lot of interpretations to these things. We know that from the Bible and the Quran. A lot of interpretation over things that maybe seem kind of airtight with the way they're written. And with Pushkin, it's even worse because there's like poetry and, fantasy stuff. And they really are sure that it's all about decoding Pushkin. Just got to decode him.
Pushkin was actually Afro-Russian, right?
Well, 1/4.
That's a lot.
Well, not in Russian terms. It's it's a Russian races and ethnicity are determined by your patrilineal lineage. So whoever his grandfather was, his last name worked out to be Russian sounding. Maybe he changed it, but patrilinearly he's Russian.
I see. Well, that's good to know because in America we always had the one drop rule, So.
Yeah. And in fact, if you think about that, that's very exclusive. And, if it was the opposite, maybe we wouldn't have any racial problems in America at all. Think about that one.
Exactly.
But in fact, I have a whole on my channel somewhere, an entire live stream where I talk about that particular topic for about like an hour and 20 minutes. So maybe people who want to look for Tim Kirby Russia Hardcore,
we're going to plug all that. Yeah, we plug and share that a lot. We'll definitely do that.
But anyways, on Rumble, you'll find it for sure. YouTube is unreliable, and BitChute works like garbage in Russia, and I'm considering giving up on it because it's just such a pain in the butt. So I'm very behind.
No, don't give up. No, don't give up. Whatever you do, don't stop. No, absolutely. No. I don't know,
Lucky. This is a tough time, man. I am close to because my palate is awful full. And I am
Well, I mean, if you've
definitely,
got other projects that are more
yeah,
interesting or profitable or whatever, of
yeah,
course, then I see those as stepping stones to what you're doing. But if yeah, okay. Well, let me
yeah.
ask you, because the essence of time thing, Kurginian is more interesting than the security organization cult.
Oh yeah, the
Um,
other one I just brought up because it's insane and it's fun to
oh, right,
laugh
because
at.
it is
No,
crazy, yeah, and they're
yeah,
losers, right?
Prigozhin is a respected thinker within Russia, and he's someone whose opinions are listened to and taken seriously, even by people who disagree with him. Because the one thing is, it's kind of like ultimately he really wants to bring back some kind of form of communism, and I really don't. But I really respect the guy, and ironically, it's one of these things where it's like, how do you know so much about communism, but then he's also very much for parental control over children? Like he probably with his first waves of protests really stamped out in Russia any attempts to install what they call juvenile justice, which is that mechanism that they have in Scandinavia where if you
Right.
don't have enough fruit in your fridge, they take your kids away. He
Right.
really stamped that out. So first off, I would like to say, if he's listening or any of his followers are, thank you, sir. You have saved the lives of millions of children. Bless you. Okay. So he believes in that, but then he also believes in communism. So it's kind of like,
But it's a
dude,
different kind of thing. I mean, because it's called essence of time, and
yeah.
there's some mystical component to this. It's not standard Marxism, Leninism, or whatever.
No. It is definitely the like the next evolution. It's a sort of, again, that's why he calls it USSR 2.0, not restoring the USSR, as in a revisioned, remixed version. The problem is, maybe if I would have been a bit more, if I would have known we would have been talking about this today, I could have researched it. I've kind of forgotten a lot of his tenets, but I'll put it this way. Could be worse. I am more of a fan of the philosopher who cannot be named because he cares. I'll put it this way. He does see the importance of economics, but he's not particularly tied to some sort of school of reasoning about this sort of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
He's more a little bit on the side of whatever works.
It means to an end, yeah.
And then when we get into this whole thing about like, well, what if we did, now that we have computers and like AI and we can really actually solve the problem of communism, where we can really determine what people's demands are thanks to computers. And it's like, let's just not risk it. Let's just not risk doing this again. Let's just let it go. But ultimately, I think
that's what Allende was doing in Chile. What they were using, like before the internet, they were using a system of baud communication, of phone line between in the area of like tin production, for example, and the smelting. So they would have, instead of like managers having to take an account and then do like a report and then send in a request, everything was like in real time. So the units out were this is in Chile, like under Allende, that they were doing it like that. So yeah.
Well, yeah, and then what you're talking about is essentially what would be sort of the future for communism in the 21st century, and why I think in some ways why it's kind of been not why it's been invigorated among young people, but amongst intellectuals, is they're kind of seeing like, that was kind of the missing piece of our communist utopia puzzle. Now we've got it. But again, man, when you attack private property, and you sort of I don't know. I think still the overall idea doesn't quite line up with the way that human beings work. And also, I think since the late 1700s, our quest to create equality has completely failed. And I think we need to embrace that we live in societies that have hierarchies. And I think that hierarchy is something that is an inescapable reality of life. And someone might say, hey, Tim, are you arguing some sort of totalitarian fascism? Nope. I'm saying that it's like death and taxes. It's unavoidable. Like it or not, most people don't like it, but that's the way it is. And I think we need to start, or at least when I talk about politics, and Joaquin, I've been failing to write a book for the last 5 years, which you may be anxiously awaiting, or at least in the past you were, before you've probably gotten burnt out waiting for me to get it done. One of the key theses of this book is that we have to sort of more embrace building a system around the way humans are. And one thing, man, is we don't exist in societies that have pure equality. And I think we've never even come close to having a society with any kind of equality, even economic. The Soviet Union was maybe the closest to that there ever was of economic equality, but in terms of like political equality, never, ever even close. So we need to give up on this.
No doubt brilliant, of course, like as an intellectual, but it's disconnected from how people actually live in the world, and it's kind of like it assumes so many things about human nature that aren't really there. Like anyone who's actually done work in the world knows it's very common for someone to try to like take credit for your work, or it's very common for someone to accuse you falsely of something. And, you know, you have people operating in states, and very quickly these societies can turn into like a snitchocracy, because if there's only really one organization or one party to get ahead, then it's everyone's basically snitching on each other instead of being able to form some kind of opposition within the system.
Well, yeah. Well, when we talk about healthcare, we'll go with, there might be like a single organization to deal with healthcare. That's also kind of questionable. But then when you get into this whole thing of there's one employer, think about that. In the Soviet Union, ultimately, although the factories were semi-independent or sometimes actually very independent from each other,
after
ultimately there's one employer. That's it. You make that employer angry, you're mopping. You're mopping floors till you die. Like that kind of stuff is just too much. Too grand, too big, too much. No, I pass.
I mean, as a consequence, Russian prison culture was extremely anti-communist.
I'm not surprised. Well, also because remember, the communists were a lot more. Now we have to say this. Try to get closer to the truth of history. And the stereotype is that in the Soviet Union, they just put everyone in jail, and that's not true. The prison population as percent of like the population. Actually, in America, we have more people in jail now during Stalin's tyranny, okay, by percentage. Or actually, they're kind of close. So there was never this time where like everyone was in prison, but we can say that with the Soviet Union, they were very optimistic about putting people in prison. You know, if you're accused of something, you're kind of guilty. And the stuff that you would get sent to prison for was very nominal. And one thing you have to remember is that with the Soviet Union, they had this policy where if those who don't work don't eat. Okay, well, that sounds cool. But that means that if you sort of are caught refusing to work 4 times, you're executed. You know what I mean? So it's kind of like
because you had this maxim from Marx. Marx's maxim was to each according to his ability, to each according to his need, from each according to his ability. But under Stalin, they changed it to each according to their work, from each according to their something. It was like very similar, but the twist was basically if you don't work, you die.
And so ultimately, Joaquin, what happens? So it's sort of like, okay, we look at the capitalist world. Well, if you don't work, you die. Unless you're in some sort of weird welfare state where they start paying people who are poor just to be poor. That's sort of a little interesting, I think, historical exception. But ultimately, in the Soviet Union, if you don't work, you're screwed. In the West, in capitalism, if you don't work, you're screwed. If you're a feudal serf and you don't work, and all your cousins are out in the field and you never do anything, I have a strong feeling your cousins are going to come there and start beating you until you work. Or perhaps if you're someone more important in the family structure, perhaps the Lord of the land might be like, dude, I'm letting you use this piece of land. Where's my 10% of the grain? What are you doing? Whack. So throughout all of human history, the average sort of commoner person has had to work. And it doesn't matter what system it is. It doesn't matter if it's red, white, blue, green, yellow, rainbow, or whatever. You know what I mean? And this is why one of my main sort of, concepts of this book of ideas I want to write is that we just have to accept that there's some sort of hierarchy and structure to things. Because if we wake up and say, okay, the average person is going to have to toil. Maybe 21st century technology is limiting the amount of people who are actually needed in the workforce. But ultimately, someone is going to have to toil, no matter what. And maybe toiling under communism floats your boat. Maybe toiling under capitalism floats this guy's boat. But you're still going to be toiling, and you're still going to be in some sort of pyramid of hierarchical power where the overwhelming majority of people are on team toiling as serfs.
That's just the nature of life. And it's so now in Russia now, okay, we're now just shifting gears here, practical, concrete, looking at the conflict, okay. What do you think is going to happen in terms of, is just your sense of things? I know you're not a military analyst, but you're there's vibrations, there's people on the street, like you said, it's there's no real sense that Russia's at war in Russia. I mean, you wouldn't get that from just walking down the street, right? You can talk to people, and you would obviously have that as a subject if you brought it up. But what, do you think that if Russia is going to move into Odessa, or even maybe I don't know if Kharkov would even be a lower hanging fruit at this point, that this is going to require like a larger contribution or awareness, or not military mobilization, but I mean social political mobilization of society to just in terms of to complete the objectives of this conflict?
No, I would say the opinion of the masses is just kind of like, get her done. So that was the one thing about the whole like Prigozhin uprising, is that it did actually represent a certain viewpoint on things of, let's get this over with. You've probably heard that from your Scott Ritters and McGregor's and the other sort of circle of these kind of experts. And they're right. That really is the mood of things. It's like, okay, let's end this. Get it over with. Let's move on. And the ironic thing that people might understand is because so many people want to take vacations in Paris.
Right.
Like, you know what I mean?
Right.
People are like, let's get over with this because I want to go get baguettes. You know what I mean? Like, they're just like, let's end this. We're going to make the country bigger. Everything's going to be great. And you know what? Hey, after the war's over, maybe a lot of the sanctions will go away and we can order our fancy Nike clothing again.
Right. So that's like a lot of in the mindset. But I mean, between now and then, I mean, you're talking about the potential for Russia at a certain point is gonna feel like, okay, this is what we want to have, or this is what we think the objectives are. Now here we are, we're wrapping up. But the U.S. can continue to. You have the Ukrainians in Canada. You're going to have maybe, I don't know what's going to happen to Lvov, what have you. The areas in the very, very west of Ukraine, the hotbed of true Galician ultra-Nazism. I mean, isn't there a threat of a security thing and terrorism and things like ongoing after the conflict? I mean, just before you answer, as background, after World War II was over, these Ukrainian Nazis continued to wage a guerrilla conflict that went into the middle of the 1950s.
Oh, yeah. That's the whole Stepan Bandera thing, where he was active for, I think, about 10 years after the war till he was killed. Oh, man. I just heard this the other day. I believe he's buried in Munich, but I think he was killed somewhere, actually, in like East Germany. I forget. But anyways, yeah, the activities of those Ukrainian nationalist armies or whatever continued for quite some time, even after the war was over. However, they were Fidel
Castro, Fidel Castro was greatly inspired by Bandera.
Oh, well,
yeah.
I don't know if the tactics
not ideologically, on the tactical military stuff. Like Bandera revolutionized certain aspects of guerrilla warfare, which that Castro would be involved in, and I think there was even training, because remember, Castro at the beginning was an American asset. So
well, that's probably where they then got the idea from, because again, if you think about it, he was able to for many years continue to sort of wage his one-man terror war against the Soviet Union. Maybe not completely one man, but yeah, so I could kind of see where that would come from.
The OUNB, the whole OUNB group.
But I'll tell you one thing about political correctness in Russia, Joaquin, is saying even one thing, even slightly positive about that man, could get you in a lot of trouble. Let's just say we're going to move forward, and I'm not going to say anything positive about him for the sake of my health. I do enjoy breathing. But anyways, about we were talking about like the what's going to happen after the war. I think the Russian public is not really thinking about that very much. I don't think that the Russian public is thinking, well, then what's going to be the next play from the West? Again, the Russian public doesn't understand the West at all. They don't really understand their motivations. They don't really understand how our elite work or think, or their logic, or how media games work and projection and optics and all this.
What do they think? What do they think?
They just sort of think that this is going to end and everything is going to go back to normal. Normal being some sort of like Yeltsin era rapprochement, and that everything will just sort of work out and be fine.
That's kind of a weird thing to think.
Yeah. Well, that's kind of the way I see it. If you're talking about the average commoner in the public, yeah, that's the way they see things.
That's kind of a dangerous belief. I mean, it's very unlikely to go down that way.
Russians are naive, man. Like, it's shocking sometimes how we can have this gigantic empire and yet we're as naive as, well, I guess there was this one interpretation that Christ was actually very naive kind of feeling, because he was sort of like, almost in a way alien to us, and rejecting all these material things. So maybe it's some sort of trend from orthodoxy that being somewhat naive and embracing of stuff is acceptable. But I would say that from a standpoint of someone who writes about ideology, it is a major weakness to Russia. Again, Russia is just way too naive as a society. I think the people who are actually in power actually are not so naive, but they're still Russian, so they still have the taint of naivete.
There's this kind of naive belief that the war can end, and then the West will be like, shake your hands.
Forgive me for cutting you off, but I just thought of a good example. There's one theory. Now, I'm not going to say whether I believe in this theory or not, but there's one theory that the initial beginning of the start of the special military operation, where the Russian forces went in real quick with like 90,000 guys to kind of go by Kiev to sort of scare Kiev into making an agreement. Let's just say that was true. If that was true, and Putin thought we could just sort of scare them into making a deal with us, and they'll sort of let the two republics break away, we'll work out some sort of deal about neutrality, and everyone will be happy. That is naive from a Western standpoint. Any Western person who understands politics and understands the way our Western elite works.
Yeah, they don't understand the cynicism and the depravity, or I would say even the sadism in the Western elite.
Yeah. No, especially the sadism. They don't understand where it's funny to them. I don't know. I would really say that for how many people play video games, or even back in the old days, your tabletop war games. Like if you play, let's just say again, we'll go back to Warhammer. There's something that's kind of I don't know, fun, or I was just like, my favorite game was Warzone, and it was kind of fun to play as the like biomechanical bad guys, because you have these they're actually called legionnaires, so you have these legions of just undead zombies with assault rifles, and sometimes it's kind of fun because who cares if they die? You could try crazy tactics. There's something glorious about just sending this like wave of zombies to get gunned down, and that's really how the elite sees real people.
Right, yes,
maybe even
clear.
Worse. Yeah.
Yeah, because you would think that the Russians would know or understand how the Americans waged war on Vietnam, how that was primarily a war against civilians, and how they bombed villages, and how they just indiscriminately attacked people. And do Russians think that the West sees them as kind of like white people or Europeans, or do they not understand that Slavs are seen as sort of like Asiatic or something that only appears sometimes to have blonde hair?
Joaquin, for the last 10 plus years I've worked in the media, every chance I get, I bring up the fact that Western people consider Russians to be subhuman. Russians cannot wake up to this fact. This is this whole trend where I think finally this war and some of the things that are happening culture in Europe are enough weight to stop the historical inertia from Peter the Great declaring that the West is God and we're garbage. That 300-year period is now starting to come to a close, but it's definitely not closed yet. And Russians just can't get it. It's about their naivete. They cannot get that the West sees them as animals. And this is one of the things where I had got an important point coming. Hold on. Got an important point. I have one friend who said, well, Tim, I think that the Russians have just traded being a colony of Europe to being a colony of China. And I can tell you why I could never believe that. Because the Russians don't have an inferiority complex about the Chinese. It's amazing. The Russians, when they talk about Europeans, everything is, well, after the war, we'll be friends again. They want to be liked by the Europeans. They'll do anything just so that way the Europeans understand us. When it comes to the entire rest of the world, they don't act like that. when it comes to China, everything is like Henry Kissinger realpolitik. Of course, the Chinese want to be strong. They want to be strong like us. Of course, you need to make good, respectable deals with them. There's zero pandering, zero this inferiority to the Chinese. It's unbelievable. Like you could just see it day and night, black and white. Unbelievable.
Unbelievable. Wow. Yeah, I was just mentioning your reference to Peter the Great. I was giving audience background. Peter the Great was the one that ordered Russians to shave their beards and begin to dress in the Western style.
Yeah. And a lot more. There were a lot of social reforms and all this other stuff. So he also got rid of the patriarch. You have to remember, he also sort of reorganized the faith. And the patriarch only came back, ironically, under Stalin. So, yeah.
Yeah, that's a question that divides the Orthodox, even within the Russian church today, because people who came to Russian Orthodoxy as converts or from the Russian Orthodox Church outside of Russia, they have their view is very anti Orthodoxy in the Stalin period.
Yeah. Well, those are more complex issues, and theology maybe isn't my strongest standpoint. But if it wasn't for Peter the First, things here would probably be a lot better.
Yeah, I'm also very poor in theology, and I'm a convert to Orthodoxy. But I live in an Orthodox country. It's a matter of faith, but it's also a living culture. It's a thing that you're in. It's not a hypothetical or intellectual thing that you can be wrong about.
Yeah. Well, yeah, and also I would say that I guess I don't need to be, because Jay Dyer seems to do a pretty good job of defending the faith and all those debates he's involved in and all that stuff. So that's also
Jay Dyer does a lot of good stuff with the with that. Yeah, yes. People should check out Jay Dyer. That's Dyer. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, anything else, man? I actually have to get going here, and I'm also starting out my. I think we're at the about an hour and 20 minutes in any conversation. Yep. My voice box starts to burn out, so Joaquin, I have a lot of voiceover work about the MMA to do today, about breaking faces. So I need to take a little 30-minute break here pretty soon. But maybe you have one last question or something from the audience, or
there was just someone wanted to know that when they're like, if you can provide, on your channel or something, like what's the institute or the ministry that people have to send their documents in? Like, what's the first step to move to Russia? That's what people really
okay. Well, first off, the first thing you have to understand is that I was told, the public was told, that on August 1st, there's going to be some big changes with the way everything in migration works. Whether that's going to happen or not, I don't know, but they leaked it to the public, and that probably means that something is going to change and maybe things are going to get easier. But the main thing you have to understand is that the Russian immigration system is designed for you not to be here. It does not work well for you to immigrate here. To immigrate to Russia, you have to have some sort of justification. And as a Western foreigner, that justification is generally being married to a Russian citizen. Pretty much nothing else counts. And people try to send me all this stuff of like, well, Tim, my great grandmother came from Russia, or Tim, you know what? I spent a lot of time in Russia on visas. They don't give a shit. Don't give a shit. So the migration services are not like in America. They're not on the hunt to bring people here or get them in the country. It's the exact opposite. They set up bureaucracy to sort of keep you out. And that's one of the reasons why I've taken it upon myself to think about this whole migration policy, because the amount of people who are going to be fleeing the West and want to flee the West is going to be ever increasing. So the thing is, if you want to move here, one of the things that I'll give you the advice of Father Joseph Gleason is just be here and work things out on the fly. That sounds insane, but that's kind of the way it goes. Or you try to do stuff like where you can set up a business where you essentially pay yourself as the only employee. You have to pay taxes on that money, but it's a way to sort of get around the system to be able to get permanent residency, where you have to talk to an immigration lawyer. I was also told that now they're going to help people on a case-by-case basis to immigrate to Russia for people who don't have this legal justification. They're like, Tim, organize this. People want to move in 6 months. Start sending them in to us. How many people have been helped so far after a month? 3.
Right.
So
Yeah, people
yeah,
need to
so it's
understand that. Yeah, people need to understand one thing. I think first, and maybe that this is a Western mentality, entitlement. You have no right to be a Russian citizen.
none, zero. You have no right to even be here.
Right.
You certainly have no right to, because that's the thing is, when I could talk about justification, you have to have something that gives you the right to allow you to submit documents for temporary residency, the right to actually try, not to get it,
Right.
to try.
Right.
That's a very different take. So people are
Right.
wondering, why isn't Russia filled with all sorts of weird migrants from Africa? Well, now you know.
You know. Yes. Yeah. Very good. We've been talking to Tim Kirby. Tim Kirby, all over. Just you can YouTube Tim Kirby. I think you can Google Tim Kirby, Yandex Tim Kirby. There's different shows, different projects he's been involved in over the years. You have your Telegram is Tim Kirby Hardcore. What else can you tell us? Lead us out. We're gonna throw your links, of course. We share your stuff all the time.
For those of you interested in the American Village Project, that is in a special thing. In fact, there's a lot of fake ones, unfortunately. Our good friends who might be in special services for some countries are making up fake ones. But the real one is called American Villages in Russia, Serpukhov. Unfortunately, they transcribe it as Serpukhov, but it's Serpukhov. So anyways, that one, the official thing is t.me/American Village Serpukhov without the K. So anyways, they can go there. You can find me. All my videos are on YouTube, sometimes BitChute when it works, Rumble, and so on. So yeah.
Tim Kirby, thanks for being with us today.
All right. All the best, man. Talk to you later.
All right. Bye.